Hello, everyone, and welcome to the User Research Strategist podcast. I'm your host, Nikki Anderson, and I am joined here today by Kate Betteridge. Hi, Kate.
Good morning, Nikki.
Hi, it's super, super awesome to have you on the podcast. And we are covering an amazing topic today, transitioning from a user research role to a strategy role, which we're going to get into in just a second. But before we dive in, do you mind just giving a quick introduction on yourself to the audience today?
Absolutely. So, hi again. My name is Kate Betteridge. How I define my role today and what I really do, I'd say, is I help create practical software that enhances human productivity and flourishing. Today, I'm currently leading design strategy efforts at Constant Contact, where I'm really focused right now on threading generative AI capabilities into our product to really address long-standing user needs and drive measurable business impact. What that means in practicality is that I'm still very much figuring out how my role fits into the larger conversation around AI initiatives, how research and strategy fit together with where we're going to be in the future. And I'm having a lot of fun while doing it.
Amazing. Cool. Yeah. And I'm so excited because I think strategy and moving into a more strategic space, strategic role, I think that's where we're all needing to go in the future. And so I'd love to start out with maybe trying to define the impossible, but with hearing how you define or are defining your role and what that looks like kind of on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. And it's very much a work in progress. One of the things that I was thinking a lot about in preparation for coming into this podcast is exactly that question. So when I was a researcher, I had a really simple elevator pitch when people ask me, what it is that I do. It's like, oh, I make things, or rather, I help make technology easier for people to use. When it comes to strategy and business, it's not, though, just enough to make things easier to use. It's about making them more valuable, making them have an impact, making them, change not just people's lives, but the business outcomes. And so today, how I really describe what I do is that I help add clarity into the situations and the conversations that people are having around how we can make our products not just more profitable, but also more usable and useful because which ultimately leads to profitability.
Yeah. I think that that's so key is making sure that we're looking at both that user and that business need. Because I think, at least for me and for a pretty significant part of my career, I was just shouting user, 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 and not
Yep.
caring about my stakeholders and like what they were trying to accomplish, not even thinking about the business. I was like, I don't care. Our users don't want this, and the business is like, we need to do this to exist. So yeah, I'm curious if you felt that same shift for yourself going into this role.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question because in some ways it relates to my larger background before actually coming to user research. So I'd love to go in a little bit to that because I think researchers always have a little bit of a different background. So prior to being a researcher, I actually worked in three different areas. I worked in IT support for 8 years. I got my start at 15 doing IT support for high school and college students, which was fantastic because I was the only girl and I thought that was really cool, just geeking out. And then after college, I graduated at a time where there weren't a lot of jobs available, but there was an opportunity to join a technical recruiting firm actually that leveraged my background in technology to really, and my interest in meeting people, which was a big draw for me at the time. I loved, and I was really curious about how people actually got jobs and careers, and enabled me to move to New York, which gave me, I think, a unique business education because sitting as I worked with a lot of startups. And so sitting in the offices where decisions were made, where stakeholders were like literally the CEO was next to me making decisions about, hiring and firing people, but also like getting funding for his business really influenced how I saw the importance of defining business value. And then I ended up going into career coaching as well after that. So a lot of that was, and interviewing people in that context is a little different, but you really have to understand, what people's needs are, what they're looking for in all of these conversations. And so how that fit into research when I went back to graduate school to pursue user experience, which is an area I defined as an interest to me. I brought a business perspective to that research but I also brought the human perspective of really understanding what people need. And so that it's always for me been easy to think about both in the same context, like what a user needs and how and what a business needs. I don't think they're necessarily mutually exclusive. And you can go in so many different directions. Why not go in the direction that kind of marries the two?
Yeah, absolutely. And when you do marry the two, you get such a holistic, wonderful picture, and it gives you
Mhm.
so much to work with.
Yeah.
So, yeah, absolutely. And I'm wondering as well, so in this role, what does your, if you can talk about it, what does your day to day? I know that's like such a hard question because like it can be so different depending on the day, week, month, year, but what does your day to day generally look like in this role?
Yeah, so like all good user researchers will tell you it depends.
Yeah.
But right now, it involves a lot of conversations and the ability to step outside of the it's I'm spending less time doing the research and I'm spending more time digesting the research.
Mm.
And so it could be looking at the work of other researchers, it could be reading white papers about different AI technologies, it could be listening to our sales and product calls, understanding, hearing from users firsthand, what their pain points and problems are. And instead of writing a report or analyzing findings, I'm more directly tying that to presentations of here's where we are today. And then given this information where we could go tomorrow. So I think the biggest difference is I'm involved in a lot more, I'd say, ad hoc conversations. I am also at this point still working on some more traditional research deliverables. I'm actually working on a very large end-to-end service blueprint documenting our customer journey from the first interaction they have with our brand to renewing for a year. Well, that can feel like a very traditional research product. Researchers will are very familiar with service mapping and journey mapping. I think that the exciting work happens after that deliverable is created and I get to present that out and identifying the opportunities of where are the gaps, where are the opportunities, and then help people co-create the solution. So not just recommending here's where we should go, but facilitating the conversation so everyone is on the same page about where we want to go.
That's amazing. And I remember doing service blueprinting before. And the first time I did it, I was like, oh my goodness, this is like the biggest project I've ever done. And it was so overwhelming. But like the things that come out of that are just
Yeah.
phenomenal.
I'm in the middle of it, so I can't wait till the end. But it's the first full project I've been working on as a strategist since transitioning. That's the new ask. So it's very much an opportunity for learning, not just in what you create, but how you present. I think really matters, especially in a strategy role.
Actually, do you mind? Because I did want to ask you about how you got into this switch, but do you
Oh
mind
yeah.
talking first about like presentation in a strategist role and how that might
Mhm.
differ from a traditional user research role, or maybe it's the same?
Yeah, I think for me, in some ways, it was the same because I was already thinking this way from the get-go. But when I think so, if you think about the three layers of research findings, so you have typically your findings, well, you have the data. You go out, you collect the data. And then from that data, you do the analysis, you synthesize it, and you have findings that come from that data, really about what the data means or what the data is telling you. Then there's another layer, which is insights. So connecting that information to the what's going on at the broader organization. Those are our insights about, well, what does this data mean in the context of the business itself? But then there's a third layer of what are the opportunities given where we are going strategically that can come out of this. And so while traditional, I think, user research has focused on the insight, the findings and the insights, to be effective, especially now, you really need to show value as a researcher. It's really important to connect that to opportunities because we are in a business environment. And the point of doing research, at least in a business environment, is to identify ways to move the product forward and opportunities there.
Yeah, I completely agree because I think what we can do is we can stop almost at what the data is, factually saying
Mhm.
versus what that actually means when you look at it under the lens of the business and what that could mean for the product and for the business and for the users.
Right. And we're researchers, we are trained in identifying findings and insights so that we are trained in the data analysis. And that is great. There are very few courses that I took in grad school that related to actually presenting opportunities. It was mostly around methodology and research. But because I went to a business school, there was one class where we actually got the chance to present to stakeholders. And you can have all of the data in the world, but if it's not presented in a digestible format that connects their stakeholders, the meaning is lost. And with research, I think there's the perspective that research is a nice to have because it generates insights and findings only. It doesn't necessarily connect to the broader strategy. And it could be an optics problem, it could be a reputation problem, but I wanted to make sure that I was empowered in my work to connect the what I was finding to strategic opportunities because that's what excited me. And I thought that that was honestly the best way to serve our users was to make sure that what we found got implemented in the product. And that's one of the major reasons I transitioned.
And I think that when you talk about balancing out user, business, product, the findings and insights aren't always enough to be able to do that. So then, yeah, we kind of get shoved to the side of like, oh, you're literally just providing factual data rather than
Mhm.
providing something that, yeah, like action, right? Rather than like
Yeah.
providing something that moves things forward. Because we always talk about
Mhm.
actionable insights, which is actually kind of interesting because
Mhm.
maybe it's not the insights that are necessarily actionable, but more like moving into that opportunity space.
Yeah, exactly. Again, that's what I had started to do as a researcher in my presentations, and which was great and well received. And I think it enabled me because I'd done good work as a researcher that connected to business needs to give me the reputation that allowed people to let me do the thing I wanted to do when I said I wanted to change a little bit of the focus of what I was doing.
Yeah, of course. So let's get into that because I'm sure a lot of researchers who are listening might be resonating with focusing on the things that you get to focus on because they sound, quite frankly, really fun and really cool and impactful, right? You actually get to see your work contributing to decision making.
Mhm.
So, how is it that you came to facilitating this switch from research to strategy?
Well, first and foremost, I found myself at the right company to do this that was supportive because, you can again be the best researcher in the world, but if the business is not prepared or does not need you to be something else beyond what you're not, or the structures aren't in place there, it's really a non-starter. And so I could not have done what I did without the people that were there at the time. I started discussing this transition about a year ago. We had a new chief design officer who joined our company, who's fantastic, great mentor. And it was also a time when we were actually investing quite a bit in the user experience of our product. So it was a really great time. There was change, but there was growth too. And I also, because I'd been there at that point for about 3 years, had a very strong reputation based on the work product, but also based on the relationships that I built. So I think relationship building, doing good work, and then having an organization and a leader at a moment where there was change allowed me to feel safe enough to start thinking about what I wanted to do next. And then instead of looking for a job elsewhere, actually start having that discussion at my company. Because I work for a digital marketing platform that helps small businesses succeed. And I think the mission is just fantastic and great. Constant Contact, you should totally check it out. And how I started with this was honestly just setting up a meeting with the new chief design officer saying, I have been a researcher for the last few years, 3 years, 4 years, and I'm starting to think about what's next and where I want to take my career. And I'm not sure what that is. Will you help me? I'd love to talk through that. And it wasn't like, will you help me? But I'd like to talk through some ideas with you. And he was open and willing to do that. And about for every 2 weeks, I came to him with this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm hearing. He had me go through some exercises, got me a book on designing your life, deep diving into really what my strengths are and what my interests are. And I actually thought initially the role I was interested in most was a systems designer, which was, bringing AI into this, but really, really interested in designing and inventing new systems. It was a blend, I think, of having those conversations and then looking at where the market was going in general. And what it came down to was looking at, again, the need to be more strategic in the research we were doing. And then also my background and interest in strategy and having that kind of business background from the get-go. And again, I was already doing this anyway, combined with the fact that I had that, again, like a pretty good reputation where people were willing to, when the chief design officer went to say, we'd like to move this person into this new role, they said yes because they knew me. And then he was the one who helped define the role and set the value because he had worked with design strategists before. And so ultimately, I think it was around July, he asked me, do you want to do this? And
Nice.
I said yes. So, and here we are.
Yeah. That's amazing. It sounds like you were set up for success in several ways, and you also set yourself up for success
Mhm.
by having those conversations. And I'm curious if somebody would be interested in making this switch,
Mhm.
did you do any research on like what strategist roles looked like at other companies or talking to people? Like, can you just talk through a little bit of that part of the switch?
Yes, that was a big part of it, actually. So one of the things I had talked to him about, even before transitioning to this role, is going back to my informational interviewing career coaching roots. Is who would you recommend I speak with? And that is actually not necessarily a non-risky thing to do if you ask your boss to introduce, you to people that hypothetically could potentially hire you in the future. It's not necessarily always a safe thing to do, but in this case, I felt like it was. But regardless, what I did is I reached out to people who were design strategists at other companies. I actually did some informational interviewing with people who were AI systems engineers at other companies, as well as I was considering a few different angles. And what I heard consistently from strategists actually is that there was no one way to define that role. I think strategy in particular, like research can look very different at different companies. Strategy can look very different at different companies. I tend to look to examples to understand, where I can go and what I can do. And someone said to me, the thing about strategy is you are the one who gets to set it up and you are the one who gets to define your role in concert, obviously, with others, but no one knows what you should be doing or your value better than you. And that would be my one of my big pieces of advice to anyone who is considering this is to really, as you're, and maybe even as you're working with your team or your manager, your peers to co-create your role, is to really start writing it down what you want to do rather than just look at like one or two job descriptions. So really define your role and then tell people, because then again, no one knows it better than you. So whatever you tell them, they'll be like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think that that's such a great point. And I'm so happy you brought that up because I think that we can get caught up in looking at what everybody else is doing and then writing that down rather than defining it for ourselves and
Mhm.
really thinking, oh, this is what I actually like to do. And I hate to do this other thing. And we all have to sometimes do
Yeah.
things that we dislike in any role, right? If I could be a researcher without
Mhm.
recruitment, I'd be very happy. But it just doesn't work out that way. So I think that's great advice of write down what you actually want to do and
Mhm.
start thinking about it in that way. And I'm wondering if, because maybe somebody is sitting there not really in the environment or position to make that full transition or switch, are
Mhm.
there things that you would recommend people do to start getting involved in strategy, even within their current role as a researcher?
Yes. So when it comes to presenting your research findings, you typically, there's the format of the slide methodology, the methodology slides, the findings, the recommendations. I would recommend adding in another slide called broader implications. So broader implications, what this means is typically like you might be, for instance, you might be doing a usability test on a very small feature. You're talking with 5 users. You're really focused on understanding if, this particular pay flow will result in, increasing the numbers of people who get through it without errors. But you're also going to hear from people who are going through this, their experience with maybe paying for software in general, or their experience with something that was not the focus of your study. And so a broader implication slide can be that opportunity to say, hey, also, we heard these things in this study that apply to the business more broadly. Let's capture that and make sure that's shared out. And we think it's important to be shared out. And prioritizing that is important because not everything is important, but even just one, two, or three broader implications from every study I think that that can be a great start to showing your value of you're thinking more than just this one study, you're thinking beyond that.
Oh, I love that broader implication slide. That's so great. And I'm happy that you brought it to a usability test, which feels so focused and like almost impossible to create any sort of strategy out of. But we do hear so many auxiliary things in our research
Mhm.
sessions. And I think a lot of the times as researchers, we can be scared to get too in the weeds because then stakeholders lose us. But
Mhm.
coming up with those things where you're like, wow, this could really
Yeah.
impact the broader business and sharing those out.
Yeah. And it's not just like this particular study could, but this particular finding connects to maybe another study we did three months ago, or we know that this is other work is going on and that we wanted to make sure that team got that information filtered through this lens. So it's also not just like the broader implications that came out of the study, but it could be connected to other studies as well. So and bringing that in because you can always reference, other studies in your research doc.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that because what it's doing is it's making people think broader, more holistically, more about the
Mhm.
entire, I guess, experience of your organization
Yeah.
rather than just the one team or the one area you're focused on.
Mhm.
And I'm also curious, since when I did the service blueprints, I worked with a lot of different departments and talked to a lot of different colleagues. And so I'm wondering as well, do you have any tips for people who might be wanting to talk to like cross collaboration, cross facilitation with other departments? Because I know that's one way to get
Yeah.
strategy.
Absolutely. I think making sure that your manager is on board with it.
Mhm.
And if you have a skip leader or a chief, like a C-level officer, kind of pitching that idea to him first, him or her first, to make sure that they have buy-in so they can either help facilitate those conversations or when someone comes to them and is like, hey, why is this person, investigating this? They can say, oh, this is what they're doing and this is the value in a way that will amplify your likelihood of getting them on the phone. But cross collaboration, I think coffee chats are a really great way to do that. So sometimes it could, if you're starting cold with a totally this is your own idea or this is your service blueprint and you're initiating it. I think starting with the stakeholders you're closest to in each department. So like for instance, if you know a product marketing manager that because you were in like a volunteer group together, saying, hey, I'm working on this thing. I'm looking for someone to talk to in marketing who knows like this particular product area. Who would you recommend I speak with? And they can say, oh, I'd recommend, you talk to Kate. She's great. She knows the indirect customer journey really well. And then you go to Kate and you say, hey, my friend Amanda recommended I speak with you. I'm working on this project. Do you have 15 minutes to talk about it over coffee? It's threaded through relationships. Relationships are really critical, especially in a strategy role, I think, to getting good work done, but in business in general, it just makes everything go smoother. And approaching people as humans at work and not just as, someone who's invested in doing their 9 to 5 job and that's it. We are allowed to show up and be full people at work, especially in a remote work. I think having those few moments before we get into the meat of a meeting to just small talk or just checking in, seeing how everyone is important and valuable.
Kate, this has been really, really helpful, and we're just about at our time. So I'm going to ask the last and final question. If there is one tip, or you can say more than one if you want to, that you would recommend somebody who's looking to get into a strategic role or looking to get into more strategy, generally speaking, what would that be?
Definitely. Well, if you are a researcher and you have the opportunity to define your slide decks, I would say absolutely add a broader implication slide and start threading that through, bring that as an idea to your larger team, maybe even after you've done it so they can see what it actually looks like. Also, writing a goal statement is really helpful. So when it comes to imagine in a year what you want your role to be. There's a particular formula I can go through, but basically you want to write down in the first person, today is a certain date, no, November 25th, 2025. I am working as and then you can say design strategist or a senior user experience researcher with a strategy bent. And then I am doing, and then that's where you want to start listing the work you want to be doing. and then write down how you're feeling after having, thinking back upon all of the last year that it's taken you to get here, like how like you're feeling proud, you're feeling motivated, you're feeling excited that you and then have the impact you have. And that's actually what I did this year. And I can share an example if you'd like to
Oh my gosh,
hear it.
yeah.
Okay. This is an exercise I have about 10 years of prior to this work. Actually, I was also a career coach.
Mhm.
So this was one of the things that I put my clients through, and it had some pretty good results. The key is just to read it regularly. So I started off. Today is December 26, 2024. I am happy and healthy and finishing the year softly with my family and enjoying some well-deserved time off and reflecting back on the year. I'm really proud of the work I was able to do as a lead design strategist for Constant Contact, helping to pull the product forward into modernity by identifying areas of improvement and enhancement with AI and ensuring the business is successful for years to come. In other words, I'm really proud of myself for turning towards difficulties, even in the midst of the world today. I was able to trust in my abilities and let go of my need for control and take action, trusting that all will be well in the end. And I wrote this about 6 months ago, and that was before I'd actually made the transition into the role that I have today.
Oh
And
my
it's,
goodness.
yeah, really, it's really, I think that's a powerful intention when you set a vision for where you want to be, because it helps you just, even as you're reading it, have it in the back of your mind. So naturally, the actions you take will align to where you know you want to go.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm literally gonna tonight do this. That's so
Awesome.
powerful and that's so helpful and so clarifying and just, yeah, that's such a amazing nugget of information. That's like the perfect space to end on. But thank you so much for sharing. I think that a lot of people are going to get a lot of value out of that because, yeah, that's super. I'm like, literally, I'm like jazzed. I can't wait.
Amazing. Well, I am really jazzed for the opportunity to share because I know it is a journey and I know it is a transition for a lot of people that they may be making in the future. And yeah, it's I think that the work that you're doing is really,
Thank you.
really great in helping position people for success. So
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kate. I really, really appreciate you taking the time today. Thank you so much for coming on.
absolutely. Thank you for the invite. This has been really lovely.
Great. And thank you so much to our wonderful listeners, and we will talk to you very soon.